With these guys. We're going up there?
And a particularly warm welcome to Ջորջ Կլունիի and to John Prendergast, our distinguished guests this afternoon. You're extremely welcome. As almost everybody here knows,
in society, you couldn't just sit back in your home and not participate. So from a very young age, I think the first things that I did when I moved to Los Angeles was the protesting, the apartheid in South Africa. It was, there was a gentleman who was they tried to put on the Supreme Court named Bork, that we remember, Robert Bork, that we successfully protested against and blocked him from becoming a Supreme Court justice. And so I was always involved in one way or another. I suppose the major issue was Darfur for me, because it was what I think John would talk about as a slow-rolling genocide. And it was getting attention by students, which was amazing, and by church groups, some church groups. And it was being written about in the newspapers, but it wasn't being talked about very often. And if you're well known, you'll find that there are a lot of cameras that follow you everywhere you go, right? Pretty much everywhere. And I remember reading Nicholas Kristof, who's a wonderful writer for the New York Times. He was writing stories about what was going on in Darfur, and it wasn't getting much coverage. And I thought, well, they're not getting enough attention, and I'm getting too much. So why don't I go somewhere where if the cameras are going to follow me, they can actually talk about something much more important than, what suit I was wearing on a red carpet. And so that became sort of the beginning of a long relationship, not just with Darfur in particular, but specifically in the Sudan in general. And it became a very big, it's not just a passion of mine, it's now a responsibility, I feel, of mine. And John and I think, for the many, many years that we've worked together, and you could speak to this too, I feel as if, our job is to try to, our version of it is this: it's a lot easier, everybody wants to triage tragedy after it happens. Let's fix it after it happens. And our thought is, well, let's try to stop it from happening, is exactly what you were all talking about today. Avoiding it before it happens. And so that's what, not on our watch, and what we've been working for 10 years or so doing, is everything we can to expose violence before it can happen, because it's an awful lot easier to try and stub it out before it happens as opposed to mopping up the mess afterwards, right?
Well, my version of the Darfur story took place when I was just a couple of years older than most of you in this room, most of the students in this room. And I had a certain career path. I knew I wanted to be a youth counselor, and I wanted to work with kids who were disadvantaged, who the system was shutting out. And my career path was set. And I learned, one night, I was playing basketball and I sprained my ankle. This is one of our common denominators. George and I are always getting injured playing basketball. And it's relevant to the story because I then that evening was watching a little basketball game on TV, and I had one of those, I don't even know if you guys have ever heard of one of these things, but it was a black and white television set, and you had to go up to it and turn the channels manually. There was no, I don't think they had invented the remote control. And I'm sitting on I had 3 possessions, a bed, I'm 20 years old. I had a bed, a lazy boy chair that you could put your feet up, and a kitchen table. And so I was in one of my 3 possessions, my lazy boy chair with the ice on the ankle. This basketball game ends, and suddenly another show comes on, and it's a video of this famine that was unfolding in Ethiopia in 1983. And I had never really focused on something where human suffering was occurring at that magnitude. 1 million people starved to death in the context of that famine over a 4 or 5 year period. And I was absolutely struck. And I decided I got to go. I got to see this and understand it. I wasn't at all planning a career change. I just wanted to understand how humankind could allow such a catastrophe, a human catastrophe, to occur without any response. So I went down to Washington, D.C. to get a visa, you know, because you got to get a visa to go in. I couldn't get a visa to Ethiopia, and I just got a map of Africa. I learned that Africa was not a country, it was a continent. I mean, I knew nothing. And so, and I just went down Embassy Row according to the map. And finally, the first country that gave me a visa was Mali in West Africa. So I went to Mali. I had enough money for a one-way ticket. This is all the money I had and I had $100 in my pocket. And just to show you how when you guys take a risk and take a chance and take the path, as they say, the path less traveled sometimes, how other doors suddenly open up and other paths that you didn't know about suddenly appear. So I'm on the plane. What was I going to do with $100 in an entire continent? I did not know one person. And I got on the plane from Paris to Bamako, and I'm walking up, by the way, my ankle had healed by then. I'm walking up and down the aisles, a very antsy person, as you can tell. And this guy comes up to me from Mali and says, I remember you playing, I had tried out vainly for one of the things we don't lack is a healthy ego, right, buddy? I had tried out vainly for the Georgetown basketball team. And I had very, very long hair, and I was threw the ball rather fancily, so I guess this guy remembered me. And he turned out he was the chief of the Ministry of Agriculture's Food Security Department, meaning the guy who understood why people were hungry and why they were starving. Like the one guy in the entire country, if I could have picked out, if I even knew what question to ask, he would be the guy. And there he is. Takes me under his wing, and the rest of my own life is history, in the sense that I then learned at the feet of some of these incredible people from the countries that I cared about and learned about. So that, I mean, I was hooked from the beginning, man. I just had to, this chance, this opportunity, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because I just said, you know what, why not? Let's flip a coin and go for it. So that's my story.
Hi, could you please tell us more about the Not On Our Watch Foundation?
Wait a minute, hang on. That's your question? That's it? That's all I'm going to get from you? I got one leg? What did you do to your foot? Let's hear it. Is it something... Were you saving someone from imminent death?
So I was climbing the steps up to the residences. and my roommate was 100 meters away from me. And I said, Alina! And I lost my balance, and my foot got caught between the tiles, and I fell down 2 more steps. And thank God she picked me up because I couldn't get up after that.
And how long? And what have you done? Have you broken anything? You don't know. You don't know? You do have a medical. You can go to a hospital. Still.
I know it's serious because there's POP, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, maybe we can actually get some medical help here if we're here. Well, I hope that this heals much quicker than the story I'm about to tell. Not on our watch for us. What we do is we've had several different versions of it. What we've learned about the idea of trying to stop atrocities in many ways is that you have to be fluid and you have to keep moving, right? Because things change. John and I were, and John has been doing this for much, much longer in many different iterations before Not on Our Watch. But John and I particularly spent a lot of time in the Sudan, and some of the things we had done, which were fundraisers, and we were mostly just giving the money to places like the International Rescue Committee and places like that. And then he and I were in, I guess, where were we? Near border of Sudan, like Abyei or... Yeah. Where Valentino has a school. We were laid out. We were stopped from going further up the road because there'd been about 10 people who had been killed, and so we stopped out sort of in just a little desert village, and we were sort of sitting out in the desert together, he and I, looking up at the stars, and I just said, why is it that every single person in the world can take a picture of me, in the world, and we can't why is it that you can Google Earth any house in the world, and you can't do that to Omar al-Bashir in the Sudan, who's a war criminal? And at least, why can't we watch him? And John said, well, I don't know, maybe we can. What the hell, let's give it a go. And so we basically put together a satellite that we rented, and we started following him with a satellite, basically, and his troops. And we'd find buildup of troops or mass graves, and many of the stories end up on the front page of the New York Times. And Bashir came out with a statement that said, this is unfair, and how would Mr. Clooney like it if he was followed everywhere by cameras? And I was like, well, I actually am, idiot. And so for a period of time that was effective, and we knew it was effective because the attacks only happened at night and they happened under cloud cover, and we knew for a couple of years we were doing we were having a lot of success. What we began to realize is that nothing was being done, right? So we're exposing mass graves or troop buildups, and nobody's actually acting on it. It's a thing we talk about a lot as we talk about the anniversary of the Armenian genocide. When we talk about never again, you've heard this many times after you hear genocide, but the truth is it's always again. It's not never again. It was again in Cambodia, it was again in Bosnia, it was again in Rwanda, it was again in Darfur. So we felt as if we needed to change things up again, and that meant that we were going to stop because these guys weren't, were now beginning to start more violence. So we started moving towards going after their finances, which is a funny way to do it because you find that so many of these horrific acts by sort of terrible people are done not because of some racial bias or some cultural bias, but just simply done out of greed and out of just pure, how can I make more money and steal it in some way. And so that's been our project, and that's what we've been working on for quite some time. And John, you can talk about that for a second.
Just one footnote to that is, if all of the people that in all of the countries where genocide has occurred that George ticked off there, in each one of those cases, the common denominator is that as those genocides were occurring, as those mass atrocities were occurring, there was absolutely no consequence for the perpetrators and the orchestrators of those atrocities. And as we look at the 21st century and as we watch these events unfold over the last century, which Samantha Power called the genocide century, the theme that continues to come up over and over again is that there was no attempt to try to change the calculations of those that were committing those atrocities. So our idea, our theory, our hypothesis, because in life you're often, when you're trying to change things, there's no simple answer. You try something, if it doesn't work, you get up again and try a second idea and a third idea. But our idea is that if we can create a financial consequence, a serious, significant financial consequence for those, the networks that are profiting from or funding mass atrocities, war, even genocide, then perhaps we can alter their calculations. Perhaps we can make them think twice about what they're doing. We still support the International Criminal Court. We'd love to see people tried for their crimes. We still support UN peacekeeping missions. We still support peace processes. But the thing that's missing in all those is what's called leverage, influence. How do you affect someone's mindset that is willing to commit genocide to stay in power? Trust me, they don't think like you and I do. But the central point that George made, if greed is one of the central motivators, if they are accumulating massive wealth, and trust me, every one of those people that committed those atrocities has salted away huge amounts of money in accounts all over the world, as we can see from things like the Panama Papers. If we can go after that money and take it, not we, but rather the international mechanisms, because, yeah, well, I mean, if you guys need a little extra money, want to build another gym, whatever, but if we can create that kind of consequence, maybe that'll change some of their behaviors.
You know, before you continue, I realize I need to say something because it's going something which I thought is not right, and I want to be sure we are living in a new world. 2 days ago, I made an interview, and the last question that I was asked, the journalist interrupt, say, "Oh, no, time over." I want to ask one question before we're going next. Opportunity for somebody to ask you a question, George. The kids who is here, from 184 kids, how many of you from the countries where is the conflict going on now? Please, can you look in? Okay. How many? Okay. How many of you saw the deaths of the people who've been around you because of the conflict? Okay. I want to ask 4 of you sitting here. Your unique opportunity to ask the question of George and John. You're one of the most inspiring people, out-of-the-box thinkers. You came to Dilijan without being scared from India, and you're asking questions by paper? I'm amazed. I couldn't believe it. You're reading the white paper? What are you doing? You have opportunity to ask the question, the 2 most interesting people doing something, and you're trying to do by censoring, somebody censored you? Ask the question you want to really ask.
I just want to read her question out. Why do you think Ruben is such a great guy? Sorry. You ready? Who's asking a question?
Ruben's best friend is asking.
Okay, go ahead.
So what has been the most important thing you've learned through pursuing humanitarian work?
Well, it's actually a good question. She asked what's the most important thing that we've learned, and I think one of the things you learn, and I think people who have come from conflict areas would understand this better than anyone, is that most of the time we fail, right? Most of the time we fail. It isn't this, it's not this, you get to have a great march on Washington, which we've done before, and it's fantastic, and 70,000 people show up, and you feel really good, and you go home and it's done. That took care of that problem's solved. The reality is it's long, you have to stay in it for long periods of time, and even when you do all of that, most of the time, the victories are very few and far between. Because all of these things we talk about are like a giant, aircraft carrier that you have to slowly turn. And it takes so much longer than just a single event to change them. And so I think that's one of the big lessons I think you learn is when you first get in, you think, well, I can fix this. That over there, I can fix it. It's not a problem. But fixing that causes 3 other problems. I could dig a well for this village that has no water. Well, we can spend the money, we'll raise the money, we'll dig a well. But then the other village goes, well, if I don't have the well, then I'm going to come kick all those people out and take the well. And you create conflict yourself. So it's about understanding that so often what we do fails. It's not that you shouldn't try, and it doesn't mean that the successes aren't great when they are. It's just that you have to come to terms with the idea that there's a tremendous amount of failure in what we do.
And I'll just do the flip side of that coin, which is another version of the humbleness and the humility, I guess, that one experiences when one fails and gets up again and tries again. And that is that as you go into another culture and you meet people from different backgrounds and perspectives, and you learn the history that these peoples have gone through, and you learn the complications of the political causes of the strife that the places that George and I visit are experiencing. You start and you have this idea that you know a lot, and then the more you know, at least my experience, and I think we both share this, the more you realize you don't know, and ultimately it humbles you to the point where you just say, I'm going to listen, I'm going to insert or immerse myself in tolerance and in opening up as widely as I can to understanding another's background, history, culture, politics, viewpoints, and listen. And I think that what certainly we're experiencing right now in the country we come from is a deficit of listening and a deficit of humility, where people all are running around telling you this is how it's going to be, and it's we're better than these people and we're the best in the world and this and that, as opposed to the kind of humility that allows for learning, that allows for ultimate success and progress for the human race.
Allison, before you ask the question, what John's talking about is Donald Trump. And I think it's important, American politics, if you've ever been there, is a nutty period of time during an election period. It's the nuttiest it's ever been. Americans are kind of used to it, so they'll go, well, it'll all be fine. I think sometimes overseas, people won't necessarily get that. So it's very important for people when I visit overseas to understand these things to be true. We are never going to kick 11 million people out of our country. We're never going to be banning Muslims from our country. We're not going to be killing the families of terrorists. We're not going to be bringing back torture. Because the truth of the matter is, those are just, those are against everything that is in our belief system. So when you hear these things, and you're going to hear it more because it's going to get uglier as the election goes on, know that that the things that you hear coming out of an election term right now are not things that represent us and are not who we are going to be. And that's an important part of it, because I fear that you will lose complete faith in us if you listen and hear the kind of hateful rhetoric that's coming out of the country right now. So anyway, you got one. Let's hear it from Russia. Look out.
In your work, you must have come across some pretty sad stories of abuse. Have there, on the other hand, been any stories of inspiration among the tragic ones?
So I'll tell you a story. We'll each tell a story, I guess, and there's, I guess I would say that, first of all, that we've run across a great deal of sadness, but we've also, and I'm glad you asked this, we've also come across unbelievably inspiring stories where George and I our minds are blown. Anyways, I was in Eastern Congo. Congo is the country in the world that has had the most deaths in war than any other country in the world since World War II. 5.25 million people have perished as a result of conflict in Congo just in the last 20 years. Who even knows about it? And I ran into a lady once named Honorata. Honorata was a school teacher, and she was supplementing her income. Turns out teachers don't make much money in the United States. They probably don't make much money in Armenia, and they certainly don't make much money in Congo. So she would supplement her income by going to a mine site on the weekends to sell a little salt to help feed her family. And one of these weekends she went, and it just so happened, coincidentally, that one of the armed groups in the region that was vying and contesting for control of these mines attacked the mine and to take control over it. And Honorata and a number of other women who were there selling various products that day were captured. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but she became a sex slave for one of these militias and had to live in that circumstance for months and months as the armed group moved around and attacked various areas that were lucrative financially. They were gold and diamonds and other kinds of mines that fuel so much of this human tragedy. And so at one point there was a battle, and so much confusion unfolded that she and about 8 other women escaped, and they ran into the forests of the Congo, the great Congolese expanses of forest, and were helped by various Congolese Good Samaritans all the way to one of the main towns on the border between Rwanda and Congo. And then chapter 2 occurs in Honorata's sadness, and that was that she was given a small place to stay with her friends by a generous Congolese person, but some Rwandan soldiers who heard they were living there broke down the door one day, and the same thing happened to them again. And this time she was injured very badly, and so she had to be sent to the hospital, the one main hospital in that part of the Congo. And she was healed eventually of her physical wounds, but of course the emotional wounds and psychological wounds of having this happen to her twice were much deeper than the trauma. But eventually she began to remember that she was a teacher. That's what her profession was. She was her vocation. It wasn't a profession, it was her calling. And she was looking around at the hospital grounds, all these other women and even little girls. Sadly, Congo has the highest rate of sexual violence in conflict in the world. She saw these women and girls in the same condition that she had been when she first came in, and she realized she had something to give back. And so she went to the administrator of the hospital and said, listen, I have these credentials. I'd like to become a teacher in the program because many of the women and girls can't go back to their home communities when they experience such a trauma. They're rejected by it's a very complicated issue. And so she recertified herself as a teacher. And when I got there, I cannot tell you, Honorata was a hero to the other women and girls in the program. She had lifted herself up off the ground and said, I'm not going to let what has happened to me drag me down, and become the role model for all the other girls and women who had gone through these traumas. And she had this incredible desire to make Congo, her country, whole again, not just one woman and one girl at a time, but as a nation. And I've followed her career since then. She makes a big difference in the place that she lives in Eastern Congo. And the last thing I'll say about that is that as outsiders, when we hear about a place that's hurting, when we hear about a place that's even broken, it's not our job to fix it. The people of those countries will be in the front lines to fix it. People like Honorata. We have to figure out how can we be in solidarity. So I communicate with Honorata. George and I communicate with so many people in so many different places and figure out how can we be, again, humbly, we come to them and say, how can we be of help, of service to the mission that you guys are trying to accomplish in trying to bring peace to your shattered lands.
What's your name? What was your name again? I'm sorry. Vika? I'll say this. Here's an interesting thing. You know, in any conflict area, and I think John would agree with it, and we've been to an awful lot of them, and it's a tremendous amount of sadness, but there's always, you know, somehow in the middle of these horrific places, there's a flower that somehow figures out a way to grow, you know, and they just do, and you'll be sitting there and go, there's this, there'll be incredible moments of kindness and generosity, far beyond what you think the heart is capable of. But I would argue that today, your story, Vika, the idea that your heroes, both your parents are, and that their understanding of conflict, and it is an armed conflict, and you're in the middle of it, everyone here is in the middle of it, is to find a way to find a humanity in the people who they're at war with. Not necessarily that person, but the countries are at war with. And to find humanity along those lines. I mean, that's the thing that I think you're asking about in a way, which is, when we're talking about conflict, the idea is, you know, where is the humanity in all this? And your parents have shown it in the most extraordinary and beautiful way in the way you told that story. I mean, here's something else about what Ruben and all of you have done here, and Veronica and everybody who's worked here, is the idea of having all of you together, right? Many of you, when you raise your hands, you're from conflict zones. Sometimes you're from conflicts with each other, you know. But the idea is this: as children, we are not born to hate. You know, hatred is taught. It's taught to us from our parents or from society or from whatever situation it is. And it requires fertile ground to grow. And in the exact opposite way, what you've created with this school is a place that says, no, that's not who we are. We're all human beings. We're all sharing this planet together. And hatred is not something that we're going to teach here. We're not going to be trapped or bound by it. We're going to find a way that we're all going to get along like normal human beings would, had we not been told that we have to hate one another. And I think it's a great compliment to what this school stands for and what it accomplishes. And I tell you, you know, it's humbling to walk around here. I will say that. And congratulations to all of you.
What advice would you give the next generation who indeed want to get involved in humanitarian issues in order to make the world a better place?
Well, you know, here's the thing. Advice is a weird thing because, you know, it means that I have some wisdom to give to you or impart to you that I don't really. You know, I've learned things in my lifetime, but I'm not really someone that should be explaining to you what to do with your life. The reality is, as you go through your life, you will find things, whether it becomes your calling as a career, whether it becomes something that matters to you and you do in your full time, or if it's something you do in your part time. The one thing you should always know is that every single voice, every single time you pick up a pen and write something, or pick up a sign and protest something, or go to a hospital and volunteer, or do something to bring attention. Every single time you do it, it helps make the world better. Every single time. There's never been a time that it hasn't. And so the truth is, I'm not here to give anyone advice about how they should go into the world and help, because you'll all find your way, and many of you will do much more than anything I would ever have done. But what I would do is I would encourage the idea that all of the things that you're talking about, anytime you want to get involved and help, it does make a difference. And I've seen it firsthand from small, children, from church groups, you see it from the tiniest groups of people, a kid doing car washes in his hometown and giving the money to charity. Whatever it is, it makes a difference. It always will, and it never has failed. So whatever way people want to be involved, it's always good, and never be discouraged by that. But I'm not here to give advice on that, because that's probably not my place. Maybe John has some.
I'm actually going to try to give an example of what George is talking about. So both of us, both George and I, there are many causes that probably get you excited now. One of the causes that George mentioned earlier that got us very excited when we were younger was the fact that there was a country where the law was codified to racially discriminate against the vast majority of people in that country. It was not unusual, but it was so blatant it became an international cause, and that was the case of South Africa, where a system actually was named apartheid, where white South Africans were by law superior to the other racial groups in the country. And George and I, we got arrested. We didn't know each other then. We may have been in the same jail cell at one point. We wrote letters. We went to demonstrations, and we did all the kinds of things that you do when you're a young person who sees that something is wrong and wants to do something about it. And, one can argue, decades later, in 1994, Nelson Mandela was elected the first black president of South Africa, culminating in this sort of incredible transition that South Africa went through. Just 5 years later, so it was an amazing success, and we had no idea if the little things that we did ever made a difference. But then I went to work 3 years later, after 1994, 1996, I went to work for President Clinton in the White House as his Africa advisor. And he sent me at one point to where he had become very close to President Mandela. And President Mandela had retired after his first term of office and become sort of a global statesman. And the world called upon Nelson Mandela to become the chief mediator of a terrible conflict that was ripping apart a very small African country called Burundi. And President Clinton sent a couple American diplomats, myself included, to support President Mandela's mediation. And we would work 18-hour days, and he was indefatigable, and the guy would just never stop. But we'd often have a chance to sit and talk, and he was very interested in these stories. I don't know if I've ever told you this, George, of the students in the United States and in Europe that were organizing, actually all over the world, that were organizing on behalf of him and his other cellmates when he was in prison during the apartheid regime and demonstrating against the system of apartheid. And he told me that we, South Africans, speaking of himself and the ones on the front lines, we made the changes. We sacrificed our lives. Many, many people sacrificed their lives and everything they had to make the change. But he said, you, in solidarity with us, when we were in prison, we would get notes smuggled to us about these incredible demonstrations that were going on halfway around the world, people we didn't know, young people. And he said, they were quite inspired by the fact that high school and university students were putting themselves on the line. They could have been doing anything with their lives at that time, but they were investing in this thing they called the anti-apartheid movement. And it made such a difference to him, giving him hope, giving him that solidarity. And he said it was one of the factors that he felt was most important, one of the unsung factors of why the system of apartheid eventually crumbled. And he was released from prison, and his prison mates were released from prison, and eventually the system of apartheid was deconstructed and democratic elections were held in South Africa. I thought that was an incredible thing. And very quickly, I was in a diamond mine many years after the war in Sierra Leone ended, monitoring an election, a free and fair election in a country that just a few years before had been ripped apart by a civil war that was one of the Blood Diamond Wars. And I was talking to these young guys, and it was as if I was talking to President Mandela. They were like, our war ended because, from their understanding, the war ended because students all around the world, young people got mad and angry about the fact that diamonds were being taken from Sierra Leone and children were being killed and injured and press ganged into military service as child soldiers and all these horror stories that were occurring because they said it's not right. And you guys and those young people, and they wanted to understand why. Why did these kids who had nothing to do with Sierra Leone, probably couldn't even find it on a map, were demonstrating and making a difference halfway around the world? So I assure you, we may not have any advice, but one thing we have is experience. And we have experienced over our many, many years. We haven't lived hundreds of years, as your principal had, but almost. And one of the things we can assure you from our experience is that we've seen over and over again is that when young people galvanize and catalyze around an issue that they care about, and now you have the internet. We didn't have social media and the internet and ability to organize across continents around issues that we cared about. But you guys, when you do that, it registers, it matters. Politicians, businesses, other influential actors in the international system take notice, and eventually the tide turns. And so do not be discouraged. As George said, these changes in the things that you care about don't happen overnight. You have to have patience and endurance. But you will, I think, ultimately make that difference in the world if you commit to trying to do it. Thank you.
Okay, one last thing before we go, because I think it's important that we do this. The three of you, the three speakers, I want to ask you guys a question. First of all, did you actually just learn to speak English a year ago? I'm going to kill you. He said yes. It's unbelievable. So now what is it you want to do? What do you want to do with your life? What's your vocation? What do you want to be?
I think work with science and engineering. I'm not certain yet, but certainly something related to knowledge and making a difference somehow.
Great. Okay, and what is it you want to do? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I want to try myself in medicine, maybe dentistry. But...
Dentistry? Well, you might be able to help John and I later, then that would be good. And what is it you want to do?
I want to do psychology and music together, because I believe that arts can change the way people think. That's why both combined.
Well, I think you're right. I have to say, first of all, it's sort of amazing to hear people your age who actually have some idea what they want to do, because in general, you know, I was, I think, 21, and I thought I would be a professional baseball player, which was, I only lacked talent, but other than that, I would have done it. What is it you want to do? Do you have any idea?
I want to study international law.
International law. I have a wife that does that. It seems to work out really well. And what is it? What are you thinking about?
Accounting and finance.
Accounting and finance.
Yeah.
Well, maybe John. Maybe we got somebody can come help us do some work. And then what? And what are you going to do? And watch your foot. What are you going to do?
I'm going to join the film industry.
The what?
The film industry.
The film industry. It's on you, man. Let's hear it. What are you going to do?
Economics and entrepreneurship.
Economist?
Economics and entrepreneurship.
Oh my, that's fantastic. And you can continue to wear that suit when you're in economics too, which is fantastic. Hey, thank you. John and I and all of us want to say thank you to all of you for inviting us here and to letting us invade your school. We really are honored to be here, and we're honored to be a part of anything, and we'd love to be able to help Ruben and Veronica and all of you, and Nubar and all of you. We'd do anything at all to help because we're very excited and very proud to be here. So keep it up. Good luck. Don't get in trouble. I don't want to read about you in the papers. And congratulations. And thank you all for having the nerve to get up and speak, because it takes a lot of nerve. Thank you.